It's all got to do with the currency and inflation. When the currency becomes crazy or worthless or volatile, the world becomes crazy. And people don't understand it. They didn't understand it in 1923, Weimar Germany. They don't understand it today. Thursday, February 22nd, 2024, Monaco 64, home of alternative economics and contrarian views. A lot happening in the world. We're going to look at how global debt has exploded to a new high. We're seeing shrinkflation hit the real estate market in the United States. We're seeing the Nikkei hit an all-time high. Yes, in confetti. I'm joking there, of course, but in Japanese yen, but we'll see why it's in confetti, really. And we're going to see how food prices are eating up much of the public's income, at least the average person out there in the United States. And that's despite the fact that the stock markets are going gangbusters and hitting new highs. Nvidia has come out with stellar results, right? And I'm going to try to explain to you why this is all happening, why it doesn't seem to make sense. Before I do, I'd like to thank you all again for following the channel, for subscribing, for sharing the videos, for hitting the like buttons. It really helps. And yes, I'm going to come up with the road to 100,000 subscribers video soon. And I'll let you know what I'm going to give away. I talked about it yesterday, but yeah, it will come out. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel and you enjoy my content, make sure you do. And try to hit that little notification bell as well. I make videos virtually every day. So there you go. So all those headlines I told you about are kind of confusing, just like politics is confusing, isn't it? I saw a tweet the other day that politics is the entertainment arm of the military-industrial complex. I think that described it really well. And why? Well, because politics keep us divided. That's what it does. And when we're divided, they can scare us, the military-industrial complex and the people who run it. They can scare us into saying, oh, this side is bad, this side is good. And they can keep existing. Anyway, back to the headlines. So I'm not surprised with all these headlines. But yeah, global debt hits new record high of 313 trillion, IIF reports. That came out yesterday afternoon, London time, from Reuters. I'm not going to go through the article. One doesn't need to, really. You might want to try to find it and read it. All it means in the fiat currency system, I've said that many times, the debt needs to keep growing. So this is not surprising, but let's move on. So shrinkflation. We saw recently President Biden come out and complain about shrinkflation and blame the food companies, the snack manufacturing companies that have shrunk the packages and everything. It's not just in food and snacks that we're seeing shrinkflation, of course. It's in all kinds of products. And shrinkflation, yes, it's a good term, but it's really about the shrinking of the currency, the currency's value, and it's all got to do with inflation. And who creates inflation? Well, let's look at these charts here. We've got M2, Who's been creating inflation? Well, it's the Federal Reserve. Ever since Nixon closed the gold window, it's been a lot easier to create inflation because there's no anchor to the monetary system. There's no real money, gold, backing anything. It's all out of thin air, and you can see how M2 really started taking off in the early 70s. Well, because we've had inflation of the currency supply, of the money supply, of credit, and the economy hasn't been able to keep up with it. So it's the simple law of supply and demand, and there's still a lot of people out there who think we have deflation. We'll come to that in a minute. And how does the government how's the government able to keep borrowing and spending and racking up the national debt? We're up to 34.2 trillion now. Well, the central bank, the Fed, obliges, as you can see here. It creates reserves out of thin air, basically bank money, and buys the bonds. So you can see we've gone from around 800 billion in assets, the Federal Reserve, prior to the '08 crisis, to recently almost as high as 9 trillion. As they're trimming it right now, but it's still around 8 trillion. So that's the inflation. That's why we're seeing these headlines. And so let's go to shrinkflation hitting real estate. Yeah, who would have thunk it, right? The American dream. And I think that's a misleading motto, the American dream. Owning your own home, mortgaging yourself to the hilt. I would say the American dream is more, freedom and the pursuit of happiness and all that. That's the American dream. But be as it may, shrinkflation's hitting the USA real estate, and I'm sure it's going to hit the UK real estate market. So you might be wondering why. I got an article from the New York Times, which is called The Toilet Paper of Record by Gerald Celente. Well, I had to access their archives going back a long time to research something. And they had a deal for $20 a year for their subscription. So yeah, painfully I subscribed. And I saw this, which is interesting. Yeah, they do mention the fact that this has been a thing ever since 2020. And what did we see in 2020? A massive acceleration of inflation. And by inflation, I don't mean the consequence of it, CPI, but all the increase of currency and credit. And in a fiat currency system, of course, is it any wonder that prices and the currency is losing value? Because global debt is continuing to rise, 313 trillion. In a fiat currency system is a debt-based system. So the more debt there is, the more money. And the problem is that eventually the debt becomes so overwhelming that the system collapses on itself. But in the meantime, they're doing their darndest to keep the Ponzi going. And this is why we have houses like this now. 400 square foot subdivision house is upon us. And while back in the 60s, the average American family had these kind of homes, and you only needed the father, the man, to go to work, and the wife or the mother could stay at home. So there you go. That's what's happening, and that's all got to do with inflation. And it accelerated, of course, definitely after 1971. I'm not trying to criticize anyone, but I've seen that this guy here, he talks a lot about a strong dollar. He talks a lot about deflation, but he seems to be puzzled as to why we have a booming economy while It's been 30 years since food ate up this much of your income. So, and he notes, stocks at all-time highs, unemployment low, people can't afford to eat. Well, why is that? Well, not because the dollar is strong. If the dollar was really strong, people would be buying a lot more food. This is all about currency debasement, and it hits, of course, the bottom 50, or even you could argue the bottom 90, but I would say it's more the bottom 50% of the public. The top 1% or even 10%, they don't care that much about food prices because it's a small part of their earnings. And am I being socialist here? No, I don't believe in wealth redistribution because it's theft. What I believe is in sound money and a system where, or not even a system, a world where we don't have central banks helping governments and banks create money out of thin air so they can do this. And I replied to that tweet and I said, this is a symptom of inflation, of course, or currency debasement. Deflation is a myth. And if we did have deflation, food prices would most probably go down. And by deflation, of course, I mean the money supply, M2, Fed's balance sheet coming down. And usually you get lower prices, which is a good thing. It means you can buy more. And someone replied here to me. I'm not sure if he was being sarcastic or what, but it's difficult to say on social media. He said, why does it matter about the 90% who are struggling with inflation and living costs if things are going well for the 20% who own 80% of the stock market? Why should the system care about the masses? And I think he's being sarcastic, but I replied, eventually, if the masses disappear, if they've got no buying power, you destroy the middle class and the lower classes, the system will go too. You only need to look at Argentina. So yeah, Argentina now, poverty is almost at people, almost 50% of the people are living in poverty. And unfortunately, that's the way we're going. And that's why, like in countries like Venezuela and Zimbabwe, when they are having their hyperinflation, their stock market is doing really well. Now to the yen or the Nikkei. Well, it's today. Nikkei FT reporting. Nikkei 225 index eclipses record high after 34 years. Benchmark tops highest ever level in late 1980s. Asset bubble after powerful rally since January. So what I mean when I said Nikkei hits high in terms of confetti? Well, because if you look at the Japanese yen, well, let's first look at the Japanese yen in terms of gold, the gold price in terms of Japanese yen. Well, we're at all-time highs here on a monthly basis at 305,000. Since 2007, we've come up from 70,000. So gold, of course, is the ultimate measure of wealth and value, and it has been for thousands of years. We can say that about gold, not about anything else. And then we've got a more interesting chart here, and you see what I mean by confetti. I actually designed this to be from the 29th of December, 1989. Why 29th of December 1989? Well, because according to the FT, that's when the Nikkei hit an all-time high back then. So this is how many grams of gold you can buy with one Japanese yen. And as you can see, the Japanese yen has lost 81% of its value versus money. And you might think, what do you mean money? Well, gold is money. Everything else is credit. That's not me who's saying this or who said that. That was the J.P. Morgan back in 1913. So there you go. So my conclusion is, and you probably know by now, that all these mixed signals all the inequality, all the things that don't make sense. It's all got to do. It's all got to do with the currency and inflation. When the currency becomes crazy or worthless or volatile, the world becomes crazy, and people don't understand it. They didn't understand it in 1923 Weimar Germany. They don't understand it today, and it's puzzling, isn't it? You'd think we'd understand it by now, but people don't seem to learn from history. And as Lenin was allegedly, he apparently said that inflation is the process through which the people in power destroyed the bourgeoisie or the middle class. And we're seeing that, not just in the United States, here in the UK. And he said that not 1 in a million understands the process. Hopefully you are one of those. There seems to be a lot of people out there that still don't understand inflation. So yeah, I'm going to end it right here. Keep it short and sweet. Yeah, I'll just say one thing. The bond market is not out of the woods. We're seeing the 10-year yield still testing that 433 level. Keep an eye on that. Yesterday we saw the stock market being under pressure all day, and then it rallied in the last 15 minutes, and then it's rallied overnight because Nvidia had good results. I looked at a long-term chart of the NASDAQ or S&P, and I don't think yes, we might have a crash, some kind of crash and correction, but it's going to keep going. They've lost control of it. And by control, I mean it's going to melt up, and it's a symptom of currency debasement. And I think we could be on the cusp of hyperinflation. As for gold and silver, they're still pretty steady. And yeah, with that, I'm going to wish you all a very good day. Take care. Bye.